Hello, and welcome to this episode of Bring Your Product Idea to Life. Today I'm talking to Caroline Cookson. Caroline helps challenger consumer brands turn pricing into a competitive advantage so they can grow profitably without second guessing what to charge. So, as you can imagine, we spoke today all about pricing. This was a really great conversation. Caroline explained what a pricing strategy is, how to price your products, how not to price your products, and what to do if you find yourself in the position of perhaps knowing you're undercharging, perhaps constantly running discounts and sales and promotions and being worried about stopping them. Maybe what to do if you're overcharging, how much attention to pay to your competitors and what their prices are. We covered an awful lot, and there is so much really useful practical advice in this episode. So now I'm going to stop talking and introduce you to Caroline. So, hi, Caroline. Thank you so much for being here.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me.
So, can we please start by you giving instructions to yourself, your business, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Caroline. I am the founder of Cookson Partners, which is a pricing and growth strategy consultancy. And I work with SMEs and startups of mostly challenger brands, helping them refine their pricing, figure out their growth strategies, and effectively just make their business more profitable in a way that aligns with their values.
Amazing, thank you. And so you've come today to talk to us all about pricing. So the first question I've got for you, Caroline, and it's a big one to dive into, is what's the difference between setting a price for your products and having a pricing strategy?
Yeah, so setting a price for your products is just can just be picking a number. It can be, saying, okay, these are my costs and adding a margin on top. It can be looking at a competitor and just picking, aligning yourself with them. Whereas having a pricing strategy is really taking that step back to really think about, okay, what does my pricing say about me? So, as a starting point, pricing is one of the four P's of marketing, right? It's a very important part of your marketing mix. So it's something that should be treated as the rest of your brand strategy would be. And you need to kind of understand where you sit strategically. So not only, what is the number, but what does it say about me? How does it align with the positioning of my brand? How does it align with the competitors? Where do we sit? And just really taking that step back to be able to clearly articulate your value and why it is that you're priced the way that you're priced.
That makes sense, thank you. So you mentioned your competitors' pricing there. So how much should you know about what your competitors are charging, and also how much weight should you give it? Like, should you try and be in line with your competitors? Yeah,
Yeah,
how much do you need to think about it?
yeah, absolutely. So you should absolutely know where your competitors are priced because that's what your customer, what your consumer is going to be seeing. They're going to be, looking, they're going to be making a decision and comparing you to other products. So you really need to understand what your competitors are priced at and why. But then as to how much attention you pay to it, that's a very different question, right? So you need to know where they are. You need to know how you compare to them. But you also need to have a very defined view on where you sit, right? And that might be following your competitors, that might be pricing yourself above them, and that might be just completely ignoring where they're priced and doing the pricing your own way.
So I guess that's why it makes sense to have your own pricing strategy, because then you'll sort of set that out for yourself before you look at your competitors. Is that how that would work?
Exactly, exactly. So you can be really clear on this is where I sit versus the rest of the market. This is why, this is the value that I bring. And then when you go and look at your competitors, it really helps you decide, where amongst them you're going to sit or, how you're going to do your own completely different pricing strategy. Um, an example of that would be somewhere like Bold Bean Company, right? Where they have taken beans as a category and they haven't pegged to the rest of the category. They're priced three times higher than the rest of the bean category, but where they are make sense because they're actually a high quality protein. And so you can look kind of externally at what other proteins might be and price in a different way from the rest of the category. So there are a lot of different ways that you can approach it. And it really depends on your product and what it is that you're trying to do.
That's really interesting. Thank you. So, if a founder came to you and said, "Okay, I've got a new product. I'm trying to figure out what to charge," walk us through how you'd approach that conversation and what steps you asked them to go through.
Yeah. So all of your pricing decisions should really start with your customer, your consumer, the person who's buying it at the end, because they're the ones who are going to make that ultimate pricing decision. So I would start with understanding your product and what value you bring. Are you premium? Are you standard? What's your strategy around your product, right? What is it that you bring? So it's really understanding the positioning of your product and then understanding how your consumer sees it, right? And in an ideal world, you'd have consumer research that would be able to help you with that decision. But obviously, if you're a new brand starting out, you might not have those budgets. So in that context, I would then look at the competitive set and understand how your product compares to them, and then take your pricing decisions based on kind of looking externally and understanding where the rest of the market is, and where you can take your pricing from there. But yeah, always start with the consumer is the kind of number one headline on that. Really understand who you're selling to, and as much as you can, what kind of price sensitivity they might have.
Thank you. Now, I've heard a lot about cost plus pricing, and I know that that's quite common. In your opinion, does pricing your products that way work? And if not, what's the problem with doing it that way?
Yeah, so I really don't like cost plus pricing. The reason is, so I just said you need to keep your customer at the heart of your pricing decisions, right? Cost plus doesn't have the customer anywhere in it. That's all about you and your margins. And at the end of the day, the person buying your product doesn't care how much it costs to make it. They don't care about your margins, right? They care about what the prices that they're going to be paying. So cost price, it just takes your customer completely out of that equation. And so I'm quite anti cost plus. Like the caveat is that obviously your pricing does have to work from a financial perspective, right? So once you've figured out your consumer led price positioning, you absolutely need to stress test that with your financials and make sure that the financials stack up, because you need a profitable business to be able to grow for the long term. So there is a balance in there of needing to understand what your cost plus pricing could be, but really you should always be starting with your positioning and the consumer, and that end of it, and then the costs kind of follow from there.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about promotions. I know there are some brands I think can get in the habit of running promotions or discounts quite often. I'm sure we can all think of big brands that do this. But
Yeah.
for a small brand who's maybe in the habit of constantly running promotions or having some sort of discount on, how do they get out of it? Because I think if you train your customer to expect that there's always going to be another deal, there's always going to be another offer, this can be quite a tricky thing to get over. What advice would you have for someone in that situation?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation to be in, right? Promotions are quite addictive in a way. You start one, and then it comes in part of your base, and you want to keep on growing your volume, etc., etc. And before you know it, you're promoting too much. And in an ideal world, you'd promote as little as possible, and be very clear about why you're promoting. So, is it for volume? Is it for profit? Is it to gain a listing? All of these things are very valid, and we live in a very promotionally driven market as well. The UK promotion has, percentage sold on promotion is high. So it's quite normal to end up in that situation. However, if you feel like you've gone too far and you need to pull back, I mean, the first thing I would say is to focus on profit, not sales. So, um, more often than not, promotions might not be very profitable, right? And so, whilst your volume might be growing and your sales number looks good, your net profit number isn't going to be looking very good. And so, by focusing on profit rather than sales, and profit being more important because that's the money you take home at the end of the day, um, you've got to be willing to say, okay, look, I'm going to pull a promotion. My numbers are going to go down. My volume will go down. I won't sell as much, but actually, I will be making more money. And then I'll be in a much better position. And interestingly, Tyrrell's, a large crisp brand, they found that they were on promotion all the time. And one year they took the very bold decision, to move away from promotion completely. They cut all of their promotions, their volumes dipped, but their profits increased, right? The bottom line increased, even though they were selling a lot less. And then from that refreshed base, they actually managed to build it up so that the promotions that they were doing were much more profitable and more strategic. So it can be done. You've just got to be quite brave with it. But also, if you're at the early stages of your product, and you're still building and growing, I really encourage you to promote as little as possible, because it just gets harder and harder to move away from it. The larger you get, it's a real balancing act.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. And I mean, we're recording this during Amazon's Prime Week, where I know lots of brands have got discounts going on. If a brand wanted to run a promotion or a sale or anything, how can they plan it so the pricing still works for them?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, kind of looking at what you've done in the past and seeing what works, right? Are there any key price points that work for your brand? Often, when you hit a certain price threshold, the percentage that you sell goes higher, right? Because consumers are more likely to come in. So really, as much as you can, understand what you've done in the past and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And then if you are going to promote, generally speaking, just make the most of it. So really talk about it, shout about it, like make sure you're getting as many people in as possible to really make that promotion worthwhile. Um, that could be display, that could be marketing, just if you put the most behind it, then your promotion is going to be the most effective. And it's a really good way of bringing in new customers into your product base as well. So um, do it as little as possible, but when you do it, make the most of it. It's kind of my broad advice. But yeah, and understand your data. Know why you're doing each promotion, as much information as you can get. And from Amazon, you can get that sales data, right? So you should be able to see this is how much I sold and this is how much profit I made from these promotions or lost.
That makes a lot of sense, thank you. And I think the biggest thing I take from that is know why you're doing it. So whether it's to
Yeah.
clear down some sort of stock or whether it's to get, increase your sales for that month. So I think having a why behind it makes it make a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are a lot of good reasons to be doing it.
So on a similar, or sort of a similar subject. So let's say that someone realizes they've underpriced their products, because I think this can happen definitely maybe at the start of your business, when you're a very new brand. Um, First of all, why do you think that, or maybe even for more established brands, first of all, why do you think this happens? That we are prone to underpricing. And then if someone's in a position where they're thinking, oh gosh, I should be charging more for my products, they're definitely worth more from that. How can they then increase their prices without absolutely tanking their sales?
Yeah, that is quite common, especially when you're starting out and you're building a new product. It can be quite nerve wracking to put a price on it, right? And there's a lot of psychology and emotion behind it as well when it's your own product and something that you've built. It can be quite scary putting a price increase through. Um, my first, well, and so it's tricky to say. So it depends on your situation. There are kind of a couple of different ways you can approach it. Putting through quite a few smaller price increases is generally the easiest way to approach it, right? If you can keep your price increases sub, say, 5%, then and then do it, say, over a few years if you need to, that's going to kind of go under the radar more with retailers. So that's a good way of kind of increasing it bit by bit, and you will get there in the end. The other route is to just go bold and hard and know that it's going to be really tricky, right? If you're putting through a higher price increase, say a double-digit price increase, you're going to get a lot of pushback from your retailers and your customers, and you might get pushback from the consumers as well. Um, but that doesn't mean it's not always worth doing, right? Especially if you're early on in your journey, perhaps taking the hit and having, knowing that it's going to be a bit turbulent while you put the price increase through, but that it's going to work for the long term. That can be a really valid way of doing it as well, and making sure that you're built for future success. So that's kind of like two different strategies, and both have their pros and cons for the short and the long term. And it really depends how quickly you want to do it, what the impact's going to be, and how you can set yourself up for long-term success, which is the main goal.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I've definitely seen examples in the past, and I can't think of any brands off the top of my head where I've got emails from brands that say our prices are going up due to whatever it is, cost of materials or whatever it is. They're going to be this price until this date, and then after this date, they're going to go up. And often, if I've seen something like that, and it's a brand I shop with anyway, it does actually encourage me to shop with them because I'm like, oh, it's going to be more expensive soon. I better stock up now. So I guess it can maybe work for you in some ways as well if you've already got a customer
Yeah.
base who already like your products.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you can communicate it well and clearly and make sure they understand why. People are much more understanding about you taking price than I think most founders expect them to be, right? And the better you communicate it, I mean, that really makes a difference. So, and that's going to depend on kind of what you sell. Sometimes you need to communicate it. Sometimes you don't need to communicate it, because pointing out that you're taking price when your customers wouldn't have noticed anyway, certainly your end consumers, isn't necessarily something you need to do. You always need to justify it to your retailers, though, to your direct customers, right? That you have to justify and to make clear. But especially in today's inflationary environment, right? They're used to it. All of the big companies are taking price every single year. So in the broader context, it's absolutely something that you can do.
And like you say, not every approach will work for everyone. I think it is figuring out what works for you. I work with another brand who just sell on Amazon, and part of their strategy last year was to raise the price, and they actually decided to raise it by a couple of pence a month. So the increase was spread across the year, and it
Oh
wasn't a
yeah,
huge increase anyway, but percentage wise, I guess it might have appeared that way, and nobody noticed. The sales didn't drop at
no,
all. And I'm sure there might be some eagle eye customers who now have got going, I'm sure I used to pay whatever it was, but because it happened so
yeah.
gradually, I don't think there was any impact at all, which was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think we often overestimate how much our consumers think about our price, right? And how much they remember of it. And it's worth noting that like a small percentage increase to a business can make a huge difference, right? Like studies show that 1% in price can have an 11% impact in operating profit, right? It's the one area of the P&L that just goes straight to the bottom. So it can have a huge impact on your business. But 1% price increase to your customers, they're probably not even going to notice. So, it's that's the wider context that it can make a big difference to you, but not necessarily to your customer base. And even when you're going higher, what I've seen historically is often you get a little bit of a dip when you take the price, but then it just returns to normal again within a few months. And then you're just selling it off a higher base. People forget what they used to pay. So there's a lot of good reasons to be confident when you take those price increases.
Thank you. And so, for anyone who's listening who's thinking, oh, am I undercharging? Should I be pricing more? Are there any signs or clues that either you're underpricing your products or that you could at least review your product price?
Yeah, so I would be reviewing my product price every year in comparison to my competitive set. So understanding where they are, and have they taken price in the last year? Because if everyone around you has been taking price and you're not, then you're going to be lagging behind. So I think having that really clear idea of where you should sit versus your competitive set, and then where you do, kind of helps you put it in that context and understand that this is perhaps I am undercharging. This is where I should be. And you can ask your consumers as well. All right, that's always a good thing to do. As I get some, research done as well. If you can, if you have the money, or even just speaking to people. Although the caveat comes with that no one's ever going to tell you that your product is too cheap, right? Everyone likes to have a good deal. Everyone likes
Yeah.
to have good value. So you're not looking for people telling you that you're too cheap. You're looking for people not saying or saying that you're really good value for money, for example. That would be a good measure.
Thank you. And it also sounds like if you haven't reviewed your price in the last year or maybe not ever, I'm not saying you have to increase your price, but is it definitely worth taking a look at?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I'd say kind of as standard, review it every year. You don't have to take price every year, but you should absolutely be reviewing it every year to see if that's something that you can do. If the market's shifted, if your margins have changed as well, then that's putting you under more pressure. So yeah, at least once a year, have a look at your price and then decide from there whether it's something you're going to take or not.
Perfect. Thank you. And then on the other side of that, do you ever see examples where products are perhaps slightly over expensive than what they could be?
Yes.
Is-
Yeah, and I think especially when you're starting out and I think with a founder, it can go three ways. You can get it just right, or you can go too cheap because you're worried and you just really want to sell it, or you can go too expensive because you're so attached to it that you find it difficult to take that step back and see, actually, I think it's amazing, but perhaps the consumers don't understand the value as well as you do. So yes, you can absolutely end up in that situation. And there are a few different ways you can approach it. You can take a price cut. When you have there's always a risk with taking a price cut, especially once you get to the larger retailers, that they will just, because you absolutely can't control the end price because of EU competition law, they can just take the extra margin and not necessarily pass it on. So taking a price cut is always hard to do, but it is possible, especially when you're in your earlier stages. And then promoting more as well. So promotion is a tool that you can use to get that price down if you have priced yourself too high to begin with.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And are there any indicators that your price might be a bit high, or is it just low sales?
Yeah, low sales. Yeah, yeah, that would do it. Or and massive if you've got a really high percentage on promotion, right? If when you do promote, if your sales go up a lot, that might be indicating that actually your average price should be a bit lower and that your headline price is a bit too high. And then yeah, talking to customers as well, as much as you can understand what people are saying, and take that feedback on board with a pinch of salt. As I said, everyone wants everything cheaper. But you know, as much as you can understand that, that's good too.
That's really useful. Thank you. Now, I know you work with purpose led brands. So, does having strong brand values make pricing harder or easier, in your opinion?
It is another piece of the puzzle, right? So people think of pricing often as a finance exercise, and it's really not. It's a marketing exercise. It says a lot about your values, you know, how much you value your customers, how you reward your customers. It's part of your PR. So when you're a values led company, it's really important to get that balance of this isn't just about profit. It's actually about what we're trying to do and our purpose as a business as a whole. Um, FIFA have done a really good example of how not to do it recently, right? With their World Cup ticket pricing, they've gone all about profit, and the backlash from the fans has been huge because they've priced it too high. They've got empty seats. They use dynamic pricing, and it's ended up being football tickets for the really rich rather than for the fans, and that says something, and people have noticed that, and they feel it, right? And there's a very emotive reaction to pricing, and to people hate feeling ripped off. So you really have to think when you're setting your price not just about that number and the finances, but also about what does this say about me, what does this say about our values, and are we keeping it aligned to our values?
Thank you. Now, if a founder genuinely believes in their product, but they're a little bit scared that customers won't pay the price, the price they've set, and let's say they've got a pricing strategy and they've done everything you suggest, but they're just a little bit nervous that people won't pay the price that it needs to be, which I think is possibly one of the reasons, as we spoke about before, people can often run lots of promotions and discounts because they're just a little bit scared of putting that price tag on it. What would you say to that person? Because I think this is something that's fairly common.
Yeah, I mean, that's really normal. And it's probably good to be a little bit nervous if you're feeling really comfortable. Perhaps you're not priced high enough. So, like, acknowledging that, you know, especially for your own product, your own business, it can be it's putting yourself out there and your product out there. It is nerve wracking, and that's okay. Look at the data, right? Keep it, as much as you can keep your decisions in the data, in your positioning, in your competitive review. That's going to give you the confidence that you need to know, okay, this feels scary, but I know that my product is more premium than X, Y, and Z. I'm charging 10% more than them, which is justified because of, you know, the better quality of what I'm doing. If you can have that really clear strategy, that's going to give you the confidence to say, I feel nervous doing this, but actually I know that it's the right thing to do because I have it based in clear strategy, clear positioning, and the data that comes with that.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So I think it all comes back to having that pricing strategy.
Yes, yeah, it does. Yeah, that helps with your confidence. And the price is a lot about confidence as well.
I've just got a few final questions before we finish up, if that's all right, Caroline.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
I'd love to know what's one of the most common pricing mistakes you see founders make, and what would the fix be? And it can be something we've covered already because I know we have gone through quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The most common mistake is setting the price and then not changing it. Right. So, you know, you've got a price, you get some traction, it's working. And then I think you can get quite nervous in terms of, oh my goodness, I don't want to rock the boat. What we've got is good. Um, but you need to be taking price regularly, and you know, even if you're not taking price, the rest of the market will be, and then you get left behind and you're just leaving money on the table. And you need that money to be able to reinvest, to be able to pay yourself properly, to be able to make your business successful for the long term. So by not taking regular price increases, um, you are doing a disservice to your company, and that's the one that I see the most, is that kind of that nervousness around taking the price.
Thank you. And then the final question, if someone's listening to this and they've never really thought about pricing strategically, what's one thing they can do this week that will make a difference?
So I would go away and sit down and see if you can write out clearly what your value proposition is, right? So, what value are you bringing to your customers, and really clarify that value proposition. And then go away and have a look at your competitive set and where they're priced. You can do a lot with AI now, right? That can help you with these kind of things too. But yeah, get really clear on your value proposition, and then have a look at your competitive set and make sure that where you're priced now is really aligning with what you're saying your value is, the value you're bringing, and how it's comparing to your competitive set. That would be where I would start with it all.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you for everything you've shared.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.